Earlier on the show, we started the conversation about the social dimensions of natural disasters and how people can be disproportionately affected by weather and climate events. Tonight, Dr. Stephen Strader of Villanova University is back to continue that conversation. And let's jump back in and begin to address the manufactured housing side of things. In part one of our chat, you mentioned that it turns out people in vulnerable situations actually know quite a bit about what they need to do. They just lack the ability to do it.
Kevin Ash at University of Florida and myself and others found this paradox with manufactured housing and sheltering. Right now, the current recommendation is for FEMA and National Weather Services, you need to get out of your manufactured home. And this is just one example of a vulnerability, but it's an important vulnerability with tornadoes. Well, if we tell them to get out of their home, what we found was that those that need to flee their home lack the ability to do so, but those that don't need to flee their home have the ability. It's a paradox, and it creates a bit of a problem of, are we serving our populations, which there's more to dig in there, but that's a great example of how poverty sets the stage for this, but it's the other cascading vulnerabilities that are just dialing up the ratchet a little bit and adding to that pressure. And there's plenty of models out there that illustrate that, particularly the pressure and release model, the PAR model. This is a great example of how, some of these situations of people being in poverty and get killed in a tornado because of their housing structure, that started decades, centuries ago, maybe. So that pressure builds and builds and builds until an event comes along, and then that is released into a disaster.
In part one of our interview, you mentioned that tornado fatalities in the southeastern United States are actually trending back up in the wrong direction. And a big driving factor behind that jump is due to the large presence of manufactured homes. While Pennsylvania's density is not as high overall, there are still a large quantity of these homes within our state. So this is still a very relevant safety discussion to be having. So what are the key things that people need to know when it comes to staying safe in manufactured homes?
One thing that we found was the key to preventing fatalities in manufactured homes was how they were anchored to the ground. How you actually took that manufactured home and you nailed it into the ground with straps or steel tie-ins or have a system in place that keeps it locked to the ground. And myself and Dr. David Roosh, who's a wind engineer at Auburn University, and some of his graduate students published a paper that looked at the 2019 Beauregard, Alabama tornado. That tornado killed 23 people, and 19 of the 23 were in manufactured homes. And what we found was, in using other data too, is that when the manufactured home failed, and by failed, I mean the home itself was torn apart at the floor of the home, deaths were imminent because there's nothing left to protect you. Your home was tossed, thrown into the woods, 100 feet, 200 feet, and you're inside of it. It's not going to be pretty. If the roof failed, better chances of survival. So the number one thing you can do is anchor your home, but it's easier said than done because a lot of times people are buying manufactured homes thinking they're getting good anchoring systems, and they're not. They're either not understanding the type of system, the system that they did purchase is too weak and it's being oversold to them, or frankly, the system they bought has deteriorated over the last 10, 15 years. So there is a lot of layers to this. It's not a simple fix, unfortunately.
And while it isn't a simple fix, there is one thing that we can all do on those blue sky weather days, and that is be prepared. So what is some of your best advice to all Pennsylvanians regarding the importance of having that severe weather safety plan?
I think that especially when severe weather is imminent, there's no excuse for not knowing that severe weather is coming. We have the Storm Prediction Center that's leading up a couple days before the event to say, hey, look, be on the lookout. We're really good when we're kids about having a plan if our house catches on fire, right? Where do we meet? Everybody meet in the middle of the street. How do we stop, drop, and roll. All those things were taught to us. Even when we talk about tornado sheltering in schools when we're kids, right? You run tornado drills, but that goes away when we're adults. So we have to continue to be aware of this. That's what everybody can do. Now, if you fall into a vulnerable category, which we all do at some point, or most of us have some type of vulnerability, is you have to have a plan to take shelter. If you are living in PA, Pennsylvania, and you live in a manufactured home, the odds are 99% of the time you're in a manufactured home community. If your community does not have a permanent shelter that you can go to, like a public shelter, which is the perfect place for one, then you need to have friends, family, or have a place to go that you can take shelter, whether it's a local school or a church. We see that happen a lot in the Southeast, is people go to their churches or their places of worship. So you have to have a plan to act, because the time you don't act could be the time that you're affected. The other side of this is you need to have fail safes. You need to make sure that you have a community of people around you, whether it's a friend, a family, take care of each other. I think that that's what we find time and time again, is when people survive these events, it's because they relied on someone else to help them. Isolation is a bad thing, and that's where we see, unfortunately, people killed. It doesn't matter where you are. Tornadoes can occur anywhere, right? There's a lot of talk about tornadoes moving around, and I don't live in Kansas, so I don't get tornadoes. Well, all we have to do is just look at what happened with the remnants of Hurricane Ida. EF3, EF4 tornado in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We can go back to the Pennsylvania Erie outbreak from a couple decades ago. It happens. So I think that everybody just has to be aware, especially this time of year.
All very important information. Dr. Stephen Strader, Associate Professor at Villanova University, thank you so much for taking the time to share this potentially life-saving information with Pennsylvanians this week.